Hello, dear students. Welcome again to the Subject Media Law and Ethics with the code number OJO 123 OMC 123. My name is Levi Chonya from the Open University of Tanzania. So I'll take you through ethical theories, and today we're discussing about ethical theories and how we as journalists should apply and make use of these ethical theories, and what are these ethical theories and what are they when it comes to practice. Now, here are the lecture objectives that we have to first look upon, and then from these objectives then we shall proceed to see what these ethical theories are and what do they mean when it comes to day-to-day journalist endeavors. Now, at the end of this lecture, we expect students to understand and comprehend the ethical theories and explain the ontological theory, teleological theory using their own examples in the media context. And also at the end of this lecture, we expect our students should be able to distinguish between absolutism and relativism concepts and explain them in relation to media practice. So from those objectives then, it's important that we start discussing what the ontological or duty-based theory is. And these theories are basically used in media fraternity, and we use them, interchangeably. And sometimes you find that some of the journalists, maybe in one way or the other, find themselves implicated into these theories without knowing. So it's important that today I explain these theories in class so that you understand what do they mean and how do they apply in day-to-day media practice. Now, the ontological or duty-based theory, this focusing on the focusing on the consequences. The ontologist's emphasis is on the commitment to principles that the moral agent would like to see them applied universally. So that is the motive of the agent. So when we talk of the ontological theory, this is a duty-based. We basically look at the principles that you as a journalist, for example, you must abide, you must comply to the principles. What are the rules? What are the principles in order for me to act as a good journalist? So in other words, we are not looking at the consequences of an act, but when you want to apply or when you want to do a certain act, a certain conduct, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? From the ontological point of view, if I do certain things, for example, I do A, I do B, I do C. From the ontological point of view, is it correct? There must be universally accepted principles and rules to follow. And these rules do not change, they remain the same. So that's what I'm saying, rather than focusing on the consequences of an act, these people, or the ontologists, they emphasize on the commitment to principles, rules of a certain action. And these rules and principles, or regulations, so to speak, they should be acceptable by all the people and they should be applied universally. Therefore, duty-based theorists do not approve of using foul means to achieve the positive ends. The moral agent's motive are very important. So we are saying the duty-based theorists, they don't want to approve, or they do not approve using the foul means to achieve a certain end. So for them, they would rather tell the truth in order to harm hundreds and hundreds of people. For them, it's important for them to apply certain principles regardless of how many people are going to be hurt. That is the ontological theory. Now, this theory was proposed by Immanuel Kant, one of the greatest philosophers in the world. And according to Kant, now, people should always be treated with respect and as the ends into themselves, never as means to an end. So simply means the end do not justify the means. The end do not justify the means. This is according to Kant. Therefore, deontological theory, in a nutshell, is a non-consequential theory. They don't look at the consequence of an act, rather the means that have been used to achieve that particular action. And also, from the deontological point of view, in fact, that the moral right or wrong is not dependent on the outcome. They don't look at the outcome. They look at the means which has been used to achieve a certain end. So, for them, the means are more important than the ends. For example, if a certain passenger's bus has been hijacked by a gang of robbers, and inside the bus, it happens that there is a renowned journalist for that matter. Now, in the midst of the hijack, if those hijackers ask those passengers, is there any journalist here? Now, if that journalist decides to remain silent, or if the journalist decides to say no, there's no journalist, while he knows for himself that he is one. Now, according to the deontological point of view, this journalist is very wrong, and he's not acting ethically. Because we believe telling the truth is the absolute, stance. So, from the deontological point of view, it's better you die, but tell the truth that, yes, I am a journalist for this matter. But from the theological point of view, as we shall come to see, that is the different case altogether. Now, after having seen the ontological point of view, the ontological theory, as proposed by Immanuel Kant, now let us see the teleological or the consequence-based theory. That what does this mean and how is it being applied in the media context? Now, teleological theories, these are predicated on the notion that the ethically correct decision is the one that produces the best consequence. So for them, they regard the outcome, or rather the consequence of an act. Therefore, consequentialists, unlike deontologists, do not ask whether a particular practice or policy is always right or wrong, but for them, it's whether that act or policy will lead into a positive result. What do we mean? For example, let me just give you an example. Suppose, as a journalist now, you've been hired to work in a certain media organization whose policy, should I say, they use a propaganda policy, or it's a kind of an ideological policy towards a certain political party. Now, if you're working in that media organization, as professional as you are, but now the policy is against, some of the ethical virtues that you possess as a journalist, what do you do? For example, you are in an in-house media policy which says, or which categorically stipulates that you should use wrong propaganda, or should I say black propaganda, in order for you to win the market, or in order for you to win the massive political followers. But again, you're using wrong coverage, you're using propaganda in order for you to win massive supporters. Now, from the deontological point of view, that is very wrong, because you're using false propaganda, black propaganda, in order to win massive supporters. But as with the teleological point of view, that is very correct. It's ethically correct. Why? Because they look at the outcome, the consequence of an act. The consequence of an act is very good. The motive is well good, because they want to win massive supporters. And what if they win the massive supporters means, they're going to get, some kind of a profit, or they're going to gain, massive support. Unlike if you have one or two supporters. So the motive is good. So from the teleological point of view, that is very correct. But the ontological, they will say no. Please don't use false propaganda in order for you to win massive support. So basically, you see, from such an example, and that's just a simple example, you are able to understand and to distinguish between the two. That is teleological from the ontological point of view or theory. Now, if you go further describing the teleological theory or consequentialism, it holds that morality of an action is dependent upon the outcome or results, as I said before. So this class of theory simply emphasizes the need to consider the consequences of an act, of a choice, of an action, before making a decision or judgment. Dear viewers, dear students, when we talk of teleological theory, we basically refer to the consequences and outcome of an act. Unlike within ontology, in which we look at the means to achieve a certain particular action. So, with the teleological, it's sometimes identified with utilitarianism. Sometimes teleological theory is being associated with utilitarianism, which means seeking to promote what is best for the greatest number of people. Means the greatest number of people should be happy. The greatest number, or you satisfy the greatest number of people. That is utilitarianism. In other words, before a person decides what to do, you have to ask yourself whether this action, whether the decision I'm about to make, is it going to benefit the large, or is it going to benefit the large group of people, or is it going to benefit only a single person? But if you find that whatever or whichever decision that you're going to make, whether you're using deception, whether you're telling a lie, provided that it's going to benefit the large masses of people, that is said to be ethically correct in accordance to teleological theory. Therefore, in a nutshell, in a teleological theory, we say that the outcome drives the moral decision. Because remember, when we talk of the theories, we are talking of morality, moral ethics, etc., etc. Now, we are saying teleological theory, the outcome is the one now which drives you to decide which one is good or which one is bad. So it drives your moral conscience. So this means that the ends are more important than the means to justify that act. Dear students, these teleological teleologists are being referred to as a consequentialists, which means now the moral right or wrong is dependent on the outcome of the action, as I said. Now, let us see some of the examples that could simplify the understanding of these concepts. Let's see a specific case. For example, how do you assess Mr. Jones' belief that employing a child, in this case a child labor, is a justifiable act? Now, let's look at this case from the ontological and theological perspective. Employing a child, in this case a child labor, according to this act, it is, from the deontological point of view, it demonstrates a deontological position on a child labor in that it's always wrong. And from the absolute point of view, it's rather, it's from the absolute point of view, that is wrong. The concept is wrong altogether, unlike with the relatives. And this we shall come to see in the next lecture as we proceed, or maybe at a later stage. So the act is wrong and does not depend upon the outcome. So child labor is always wrong, and in the third world countries, we always, acknowledge that child labor is unlawful and is not allowed. So this shall fall into the deontological point of view that always a child labor is wrong. But now, if child labor is wrong in one situation, it must be assumed to be wrong in all situations. That's what I'm saying. When we talk of deontological theory, the principles or the rules apply, universally. It means the entire globe believes on those rules and principles. So the fact that the child labor or that child who has been employed, the fact that it could favor that particular child in one way or the other does not justify the act of that child being employed. Therefore, from the deontological point of view, that act is said to be incorrect and unethical. From the theological point of view, that could be right. Why? Because of several factors. For example, an act committed by John is said to be right or wrong depending on the favorableness of the outcome, according to the theological point of view. Now, from the theological point of view, child labor, we say that ethics here is situational and not absolute, because absolutes always believes in truth and they believe in principles. But absolutes, the situational would say, or the relatives would say no. Therefore, from the theological point of view, we would say that employing a child, in this case a child labor, is right. Why? Because that particular child is going to get wages, that particular child is going to get paid, and if that child is paid, then he or she is going to improve the welfare of his or her family. So that is said to be okay and said to be ethically correct from the theological point of view. Why? Because of the outcomes or the consequence, because the child is going to be employed and he or she is going to get wages at the end of that task. Therefore, we are saying child labor is morally justified if the outcome is favorable, such as the provision of wages to support the family. Let's look into another example. Here is a head teacher from a certain secondary school who decides to leak the examination to the students so that they pass. Now, if the results are out and you find that all the students have passed the examination and the school is graded one of the best in the vicinity and the students are well, awarded with the best prizes ever. Now, let's look from both sides, both theories. From the deontological perspective, leaking the examination is illegal. And this is also being shared by the absolutists who say that the act is wrong and cannot be sustained. Why? Because according to the absolutists or the deontological point of view, examination rules and regulations should be there, and you should stick to the examination rules and regulations. And not at any point in time that you should use unauthorized materials or you should use, anything that could lead you to access the examination, that is leaking of these examinations. So the act in itself is typically wrong from the deontological perspective. But if you look from the theological perspective, the outcome is desired to be good. Why? It's because of the aim. The aim is to make the students pass and to make the school, look good in terms of performance. But the means that has been used to justify the ends leaves a lot to be desired. The means used to establish the act are questionable in terms of morals. And here, remember, dear students, that we're talking about morality. But now we're talking of morality, trying to look at it from, these two different theories altogether. Now, another example is that here we have a medical doctor who decides to abort a pregnant lady so that she continues with her studies. If you take an example in Tanzania, for example, if a girl child is being impregnated while in school, she is not supposed to continue with subjects or with school. That's the rule. We have it here in Tanzania. Just take as an example. Now, if a medical doctor or if this lady consults a doctor in order for her to abort the pregnancy, and if the medical doctor decides to abort that pregnancy, from the deontological perspective, the act is awful and illegal. It's totally wrong to abort. Everybody knows that. And it's against the law, especially in Tanzania. No matter what, she was supposed to accept her situation and deliver at the end. So from the deontological point of view, the act is unethical and is not legal and is awful. However, if we analyze it on the other hand, from the theoretical perspective, we find that the ends justify the meaning. The lady has a good aim to continue with her studies. Now, the only option that she had is to abort so that she continued with her studies. But the means used to accomplish her good intention leaves a lot to be desired in terms of ethics. Let's look into another example. Here we have reporters who use illegal means to get news. Here, reporters who use deception to get news coverage. So they use, tape recorders, hidden tape recorders, for example, on the ground, and these journalists now would come, or maybe go somewhere, use, these tape recorders, hidden tape recorders for that matter. They conceal themselves in order to get a certain information. Now, that act, according to the deontological point of view, is not correct, because you don't have to lie in order for you to get news. You don't have to use deception in order for you to get, news or to get an information. So deontologists will say, don't lie in order for you to get, an information. So which means now, if you lie, if you're using deception, the ends are rather, the ends could be good, but the means used to accomplish that task leaves a lot to be desired. Question. Now, let's look at another philosophical principle, that is absolutism by Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant's absolute view is based on the conviction that human beings have certain moral rights and duties. Remember that when we talk of absolutism, it's more or less the same with the ontological theory. They're also based on truth. Certain moral rights and duties which are universally acceptable. And that we should treat all other people as free as equal to ourselves, according to Bowles and Bowden, 2004. So in other words, moral agents should check the principles underlying their actions and decide whether they want them applied and universal. So you find that the person who is making such a decision is called a moral agent. In this case, the moral agent should check the principles. We must have universal or universally, underlying principles in order for us as journalists to pursue a certain cause of action. So this action should be universally accepted. So these principles become a system of public morality to which members of society are all bound, which means now the entire public must accept these principles and that it must be universally complied. So Kant believed that moral behaviors was measured by living up to standards of conduct. So which means now, according to this theory, we must abide to certain standards which are universally applied. So he argued that although individuals should be free to act, they also have responsibility to act up to moral principles. We must have responsibility. We must be responsible to our actions and we must be responsible to actions based on the truth and principles. So because Kant's theory's emphasis is on duty, his ideas are sometimes referred to as duty-based moral philosophy. We journalists, despite having responsibilities to save the society, but we must have the duty to serve the society. We are morally obliged and have the duty to serve the society. And in this case now, we must base on the principles, truth, rules, and these rules are not changing. So in other words, one has the duty to tell the truth, even if it might result into harm to others. It's better you tell the truth in order to harm 100 people rather than just telling the truth just to serve just a single individual. Therefore, in a nutshell, absolutists believe in one set of moral rules. Rules that are common to everyone, that's universal. Rules unlikely to change over time. So which means now, when you talk of these absolutes, these are dogmatic in nature. The rules, the principles underlying a certain course of action do not change, they remain static. These are dogmatic in nature. For example, if truth remains the cardinal virtue, then it should remain the same. Truth is always truth. There's no way you can deviate from the truth. That is dogmatic stance. Now, let's look into the other theory, that is ethical relativism, as we've opposed to what we have just discussed here, and that is absolute theory. Now, ethical relativism is a theory that holds that morality is relative to the norms of one's culture. That is, whether an action is right or wrong depends on the moral norms of the society in which it's being practiced. Now, in ethical relativism, in other words, it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the particular culture where those people live in. So which is the norms of one culture depends on the way they live. That's whether an action is right or wrong depends on a certain circumstance. Which means now the action may be justified, or the action might be wrong here, point A, but the same action might be ethically correct in point B. For example, let me give you an example here so that you understand. For example, lesbianism is said to be wrong and typical and unethical in Africa. But if you go to some of the countries in Europe, lesbianism is ethically correct. I don't have to mention the countries. I traveled to one of the countries in Europe, and I found sexual objects being exposed anyhow. I wondered, and we were about 5, people coming from Africa. For us, it was astonishing. And we were asking ourselves, how come that they expose these sexual objects in the public? But for them, it was quite correct. So this is where ethical relativism comes in. That the practice of ethics, what is being said to be ethically correct, it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the particular culture and how they value that particular action. Unlike with the other culture on how they value the very same particular course of action. So what could be ethically wrong in Tanzania today could be ethically accepted in other, settings. That is ethical relativism. So which means now, in brief, if we are journalists, for example, you're working here in Tanzania, and you're confronted with a certain ethical dilemma here in Tanzania. The very ethical dilemma that you face here in Tanzania could not be the same as you go and face it in another country, for example. You could find that in another country that is ethically correct, and you go on with the reported. So, in other words, this theory teaches us as journalists now to be rather flexible, depending on the situation on our day-to-day working endeavors. That is ethical relativism as opposed to absolute theory. So the same action may be morally right in one society, but be morally wrong in another, as I said. So for the ethical relativists, there are no universal moral standards. Standards that can be universally applied to all people all the time. That is universal. So for these ethical relativists, there are no universal moral standards because it depends on a particular situation and how that situation is perceived in that particular setting. So if ethical relativism is correct, there can be no common framework for resolving moral disputes or for reaching agreement on ethical matters among members of different societies. Therefore, in a nutshell, ethical relativism are rules that can change over time, depending on circumstances, depending on the time. And it maintains a pragmatic stance that is being realistic, practical. That is the position of relativism or relativist theory. They look at a situation, you're confronted with a certain ethical dilemma, you look at the culture, you look at how those people perceive that particular kind of action, and it's upon you as a moral agent now, as a decision maker, to make a certain kind of a judgment depending on their cultural norms, attitudes, perceptions, etc., etc. Now, dear students, let's look into another ethical principle, that is utilitarianism, as proposed by John Stuart Mill. Utilitarianism holds that an action is morally justifiable or morally right if it leads to the happiness of the greatest number of people. So this principle contains that human actions could be termed as good only if they sought to promote the greatest or the greater happiness for the greatest number. Stuart Mill, therefore, believed that what mattered in determining the right or good or wrong choice was the amount of good promoted and evil restrained. So for him, John Stuart Mill, he is of the view that whichever action that you're doing, you should ask yourself whether it's going to fulfill the good of the large number of people. If you find that you're doing a certain action which is going to interest only a single person, then that act is said to be, ethically incorrect. But if you're doing something, for example, as a journalist, you're pursuing a certain news story, and you find that this story, after you have assessed yourself, after you've asked yourself several questions, and you know for sure that this story is going to have an impact to the large or to the entire nation, then you are now linked to the John Stuart Mill, ethical principle, which is utilitarianism, and that is fulfilling the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Which means now you have to restrain evil and promote the goodness. So when confronting an ethical dilemma, moral agents in this case should analyze the benefits and harms to everyone, including themselves, those who are going to be affected by the decisions, and then choose the course of action that will result in the most favorable outcome for the greatest number of people. So you have an ethical dilemma as a journalist now, and remember that you are the one making that decision. You as a moral agent. You have to decide now in the course of action that, okay, now this is something that I'm going to cover for the society. Is it going to benefit the entire nation? Is it going to have an impact? Now, whether you're using deception or you're using deceptive means, regardless of which means you're using, provided that you're going to benefit the entire nation, that is utilitarianism, fulfilling and making the happiness for the greatest number of people, regardless of the means that you're using. That is utilitarianism, John Stuart Mill. Now, we look at another ethical principle, that's golden mean, by Aristotle. He was the Plato's pupil. He is being associated with the golden mean theory. This principle holds that moral virtue lies between the two extremes. To him, moderation, you have to be moderate. Moderate or moderation, temperance and reason were the best virtues enabling one to arrive at the supreme good. So if you have the two, moral choices, for example, or if you have two course of actions, you have to balance. You have to not to be extreme, but you have to be somehow moderate. So Aristotle's golden mean is a principle that seeks a middle point between the extreme of the absolutes, who insists that the right thing must be done regardless of the consequence, and the other extreme of the utilitarian, who insists that the best decision is the one that will bring the best good to the greatest number of people. So in other words, you have to find a moderate position, a compromise between the two extremes, and you'll be acting a virtue. So a moral virtue for these people is acting, the moderate position between the two. You don't have to go to the extremes. You have to balance between these two particular situations and try to be moderate without causing harm to the other. In this case, the moderate and ethical position between the two extremes, for example, take an example of stealing the medicine, in order to allow somebody to survive. Yes, the moral virtue here is that, the end justifies the means, because I'm stealing this medicine so that to save the life of somebody. But at the same time, the absolutes will say, no, don't steal. Now, golden mean would come in between and say, okay, fine, why can't we balance? Why can't we seek the moderate position? So the moderate position would be, okay, fine, why can't I just, maybe steal the medicine, for example, just as an example, and then at the end of the day, I'll go for that particular pharmacy to go and compensate for, maybe I'll just go there and do a certain work to compensate for the stolen, pill. That will be seeking the moderate position. Ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers, students, so in this lecture we discuss three ethical principles which Immanuel Kant's absolute view, John Stuart Mill, principle of utility, and Aristotle's golden mean. And we also discussed the ethical theories that derived from these principles, that are deontological, that duty-based theory, and teleological, that is the consequence-based theory. Now here is the class activity that I want you students to engage with. That, in your opinion, I'm asking you, which of the philosophies should the media apply in taking news gathering and publishing decision? You have to justify your position. That upon all these that we've discussed, in your opinion, which one of the philosophies that we've discussed should the media apply in their day-to-day, endeavors? Especially when it comes to news gathering techniques, dissemination, etc., etc. So you have to justify your position basing on the theories that we have discussed. After having said that, I thank you once again very much, and let us meet into another session as we shall proceed to look more and more on this ethical and on this media ethics. Thank you very much for listening.